Welcome to the Mob Museum. My name is Jeff Schumacher. I'm the Vice President of Exhibits and Programs here. Such a great audience. Appreciate everybody coming out. As everybody here surely knows, we have a big event happening on the Strip in a couple of weeks, the Las Vegas Grand Prix. This event has elicited a great deal of excitement in some quarters. It will generate a lot of money for Las Vegas. The opening ceremony alone is expected to draw 30,000 people. We'll feature several major musical acts. The drivers will race down the Las Vegas Strip at 212 miles an hour, which, I don't know if anybody's ever done that before, so that's going to be pretty interesting. But there's also local media coverage and dialogue that is focused on some of the race's negative effects on traffic, for example, on some local businesses and workers. What many people may not know is that we've done this before, back in the early 1980s, and that will be the primary focus of our conversation tonight. We're going to explore the history of auto racing in Las Vegas and its inevitable ties to organized crime. Here we are at the Mob Museum, after all. And we're going to discuss the last time Formula One racing occurred here and how that history might inform what will happen and what we'll see next month. All right, so I want to introduce our speakers. To my left is Randy Cannon, freelance author and journalist. Randy is also a former motocross racer and regional motocross champion. Randy grew up in Las Vegas during the golden age of mob influence. He is the author of 2 books, Stardust International Raceway, Motorsports Meets the Mob in Vegas, and more recently, Caesars Palace Grand Prix, Las Vegas, Organized Crime, and the Pinnacle of Motorsport. Please welcome Randy Cannon. Our other panelist is Bill Weinberger, well known in town. Bill is a Cleveland native and 1963 Cornell Hotel School graduate. You didn't go to UNLV back then, you went to Cornell. He worked in the investment banking business until his move to Los Angeles in 1974, when he accepted a position with Caesars World, Inc., parent company of Caesars Palace. He transferred to Caesars Palace in 1977 and became the vice president of casino marketing. Among his duties was bringing Formula One racing to Las Vegas as the president of the Caesars Palace Grand Prix in 1981 and 82. Please welcome Bill Weinberger. So we're going to, even though this is a panel discussion, we're going to start by having Randy kind of do a little presentation about his book and about the history of auto racing in Las Vegas. So go ahead and take it over, Randy.
So Jeff, I've got 10 minutes to cover 70 years of history,
Correct.
Right? Okay, we're off to a great start. I can't see real well out there because of the lights, but do you call your members of the museum made members? Is that what you call them? Made members of the museum.
Some of them are made, some are just associates.
Okay, how many members are here? A few. Show of hands, who here is a Formula One fan? Has any familiarity with the sport?
Or clapping. There you go.
Yeah. How about NASCAR? There we go. How about IndyCar? And we're going to touch on it a bit. I'm going to go through a few pieces that I pulled from my 2 books, Stardust International Raceway and Caesars Palace Grand Prix, as Jeff mentioned. I got to go fairly fast, but I want to hit 3 big subjects. And they're going to be the first race that mattered in the Las Vegas Valley, the first premier level motorsports complex in the Las Vegas Valley, and then the Caesars Palace Grand Prix. The first race that mattered was held at Las Vegas Park Thoroughbred Track. I moved here in '61 and it still stood. It was developed in 1953 and had all kinds of mob influence. Al Parvin was an investor, a primary investor in the track. He was very close to Meyer Lansky. Joe Henschel was a great racketeer. Bert Fisher and Herman Miller took over the Flamingo hospitality operation after Bugsy Siegel was murdered. They were invested in the track. And Mo Dalitz was also involved in the track in a lot of different ways. The race that mattered was the last race of the 1954 AAA National Championship. That was the IndyCar series of the time period. It was a big event. I'm going to read this, although you see it on the screen. This was a period quote for the time, and it really sets the table nicely. Auto racing, which has long enjoyed the reputation of a clean sport beyond the reach of gamblers and fixers, will get a supreme test next November when it invades America's leading sin spot. This became apparent when it was learned that the American Automobile Association, AAA, has agreed to sanction a 100-mile championship in Las Vegas, Nevada, which has gained a seamy reputation as a gambling center and winter playground for Chicago, New York, and Cleveland mobsters. Cleveland mobsters.
Didn't happen in Cleveland.
Very nice. It got national press. You can see there the poster on the left side, the program cover. I actually have the race program, although I wasn't there. Really pretty little program. The winner was Jimmy Bryan, who was an extremely well-known IndyCar racer of the time. That's the same car that he would use at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, save for the gravel guard on the front and the change of the tires. He did win the championship that year. He was second at Indy, won the race in Las Vegas. His owner was Al Dean, who also was one of Mario Andretti's car owners. The next thing that mattered in Vegas was Stardust International Raceway. Anyone here remember Stardust? A few, that's great. In the graphic here, you can see it was between Flamingo and Tropicana, Rainbow, and Piedmont at the time, now generally Buffalo. It was on 480 acres of land. The square that the entire property would form is a square mile. And it was a premier level championship sports racing course. It also had a drag strip that ran down that straight section at the top of the graphic. North is to the right in this image. Rackets connections, sure. Mo Dalitz was the primary mover of Stardust International Raceway. The infamous or famous or regarded, revered, reviled Mo Dalitz of Las Vegas history. Allard Rowan owned part of the track along with him. Erwin Molaski, Mo's development partner, was the constructor of Stardust International Raceway. Merv Allison was also involved in the property. This is the ribbon cutting, and it's a who's who of both Vegas and motorsports. That's one of the famous Ford GT40s from the mid-1960s. Let's see who we have here. There's Mo himself, right there at the ribbon cutting. Erwin Molaski, the eye is right above Erwin's shiny head. There's Allard Rowan in the blazer, just slightly in the background there. Clark County Commissioner Bill Breer was there that day. Of course he was. There's Parnelli Jones. He's holding one end of the scissors. He was the 1963 Indy 500 champion. Carroll Shelby, the creator of Shelby American that's here in Las Vegas, was there. And Ken Miles is in the cockpit of the GT40. He drove Mo Dalitz around the track for the celebratory hot laps. And with those last two people, you've got the central characters of the movie Ford versus Ferrari. It was a hell of a day at Stardust International Raceway. This was in mid-1965. I clipped this a little bit, but this is the Articles of Incorporation for the Raceway. On the left side, you can see the first name there is Mo Barney Dalitz, and on the document on the right, that's the bottom half of the same document. That's Mo's signature if anybody needs that. If you need it for the museum, that's Mo's autograph right there. Interestingly, Joan Hayes, the registered agent of this corporation, was also the secretary of the Las Vegas Thoroughbred Association that owned the horse track. Stardust International Raceway was not owned by the Stardust Hotel at its inception. Truly, it was owned by the Stardust Racing Association. I noticed in that document they headquartered at the Desert Inn. But the Stardust did do a lot of promotion for the Stardust Raceway. Here's two period leaflets from the time period promoting events. The color image there is the Stardust Grand Prix. That was the Can-Am event of 1968, the Canadian-American Challenge Cup. I've described it as it was the pinnacle of international sports car racing. It was a North American championship. The racers were roughly like Le Mans prototype racers on steroids. Virtually unlimited horsepower in these racers. The cream of the crop race there, Formula One drivers, IndyCar drivers, the sports greats of the time period. Here's a nice quote from the time period. I will read it. In the green felt jungle, you get the impression that somebody somewhere will take a bet on anything that moves. So I called one of the big Vegas bookmakers to see what the odds were on the Stardust Grand Prix. The what? Wait a minute. Then the man, presumably in charge of motor racing pari-mutuels, came on. Nope, He said with assurance, nobody in Vegas takes money on auto racing. That was kind of the weird relationship between Vegas and Stardust International Raceway. It was very well connected, but it did not make book. Mario Andretti raced there. This is from the Can-Am event in 1968, a beautiful Ford Lola. This was the same year that he made his first Formula One start at Watkins Glen. Team McLaren raced there. This is the namesake, Bruce McLaren himself. Team McLaren will be on the starting grid of the Las Vegas Grand Prix in a few weeks. The Unser brothers, Bobby and Al, raced there. Bobby won the 1968 IndyCar event at Stardust. The next thing that mattered was the Caesars Palace Grand Prix. 1981. This is mid-1981. There was supposed to be a 1980 edition. It did not happen. Fast forward to 81. The fella in the center there, you've already met. Bill Weinberger, right here. Looking good,
when he
Bill.
had hair.
Looking good. Harry Wald, the silver-coiffed gentleman there, was an executive at the hotel. That's the groundbreaking ceremony. Correo Construction, who built a lot of the Las Vegas skyline, was the constructor of the track. It was designed by Tony Marnell. Here's Correo slaving through the summer of 81 to get things ready. It's commonly denigrated as a parking lot Grand Prix. Yes, it raced through the parking lot, but it was a deep cut, built up, purpose-built section of Formula One worthy asphalt. It ran on the Caesars Palace parking lot. The fallow dirt to the north is the Summa Corporation property that was just below the castaways of the time period. Here's what it looked like from the air. Bill, could you jump in and describe how that shape came to be?
Bernie Ecclestone was the czar of Formula One up until just a couple of years ago. And Bernie was quite a character. He and I were sitting in the coffee shop at Caesars Palace trying to put this deal together, and he said, how in the world are we going to fit a 2.5-mile track onto the space that you've got? And I was sitting there kind of like this. I had my hand on the placemat. And I said, how about this, Bernie? And I literally traced my hand around on the placemat. And I said, do you think we could get enough space this way? He said, it's an awful lot of turns, maybe only a few fingers. So there you are.
Thank you, Bill. I love that. The image on the right is a pretty good look at turn one. You can see how close it was to the Las Vegas Strip, and it's an interesting look at the skyline of the time. The Rat Pack era sands still stood. The Las Vegas Hilton is off in the distance. Don't know if the landmark is visible in front. I just can't remember. The Imperial Palace, now the D is there. And, but still, compare it to the skyline of today, it's quite remarkable. So, clean sport, down with the mobsters. Nobody takes money on auto racing. Here's a quote from the time period from the Chicago Tribune. The favorite, Carlos Reutemann, the bookies have him at 8-5. Quite a change over the course of roughly 30 years. There's the start of the race, the 1981 edition. This is literally from Bill's scrapbook from the event. The leader there, number one, Alan Jones, he won the event. Mario Andretti is roughly in 6th or 7th position in this shot. You can see that's the Blue Diamond Ridge off in the distance. Stardust Raceway was about 6 miles in the distance from where this was taken. This is right on the Caesars Palace campus. It's quite remarkable. So, racing and Racketeers. This is a tough subject to talk about, but this is the podium celebration, the inevitable podium celebration. Alan Jones is kind of front and center there holding the Coors. The other two, the second and third place finishers are there. Harry Wald is on the right, silver-coiffed Harry Wald with his chrome Caesars Palace jacket. The fella in the center with a similar jacket is Cliff Perlman. Those who have been around town for a period of time know Cliff Perlman. The Mob Museum knows Cliff Perlman. At the time, he was in deep doo-doo with the New Jersey Casino Control Commission as Caesars tried to get that property licensed. And he had done business both as Caesars World and personally with a fellow named Alvin Malnick, who at the time was the alleged number 2 to Meyer Lansky. Think back, Al Parvin, Meyer Lansky, all those folks, Meyer Lansky. And Cliff Perlman was also laid out in the Abscam tapes of 1979 as having been put in business by Meyer Lansky and being a partner with Alvin Malnick all caught on tape. And there he was at the podium celebration. My speaker here, my fellow speaker, Bill, was an employee of Cliff. And Bill was directly responsible for the Grand Prix, but Cliff Perlman managed to put his own imprint on it and was certainly visible in the pictures. And so over 3 kind of eras, epochs of Las Vegas motorsports, we've got this weird symbiotic relationship between racing and Racketeers, and it's what brings us here today. We'll have a few contrasts with what we should anticipate in a few weeks, but this was the era of Las Vegas, of mob influence, even though this was corporate-owned gambling at the time. But why should it surprise? Syndicate Racketeers and their opposite numbers in La Cosa Nostra were involved in shopping centers, hospitals, raw land, certainly casino resort development. They were involved in everything that could churn money and create liquidity. And these motorsports properties, and in this case, an event, there's still this weird, at least elbow-rubbing relationship. Oh yeah, and Mario Andretti raced there. There's this beautiful Ferrari from the 1982 event. I think that's the last thing I've got one more. Okay. I'm a little long, but might have a chance to talk a little bit about the numerous times that Formula One has attempted to come back to Las Vegas, both in Bernie Ecclestone's reign. He owned it up, or he controlled it up through about 2017, and subsequent up to the event that we're going to see now. But this is really interesting. This is a rendering. This was in the program of the 1995 Indy 500. There was a promoter here who had pitched and had gotten the at least to the point of a contract for the season finale of the 1996 Formula One season, and it would have raced down the strip at the time. Logistically, I don't know if it could have ever happened, but a year on, and the promotion just died. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. It was good. So Randy's brought us up into the 1980s, but now we want to go back, give Bill a chance to talk about Caesars Palace and about the history of Caesars Palace a little bit, and how you became involved in the casino, because obviously it's still a landmark on the Las Vegas Strip today, and it was then, but it has a fascinating history. So go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I want to start out by saying unequivocally, I'm not an apologist for the mob. But I also don't believe that the people who worked at Caesars Palace necessarily were mobsters. I think that's a very important distinction. And I want to tell you why. Caesars Palace cost $25 million to build. That's a hotel with 600 rooms, the biggest showroom in Las Vegas, the biggest swimming pool in Las Vegas, 2 fabulous restaurants, $25 million. Now, how did they raise that money? No one in the legitimate financial world would do business with a casino. Period. End of story. No one. No banks, no insurance companies, no pension funds. None of the normal sources of money would give anyone a nickel to build a casino in Las Vegas. So Jay Sarno, Nate Jacobson, and Jerry Zarowitz, who were the 3 leading figures who started Caesars Palace, had to find the money to build this. And they found a $20 million pension mortgage from the Central States Pension Fund. That's the Teamsters. The Teamsters were the go-to lender for casinos. And so they got that. Now, they already have one foot in the water with the mobsters if they're in bed with the Teamsters. What else happened? They had to raise another $5 million to build the hotel. And so Nate Jacobson was in charge of raising the money. By the way, Jay Sarno was the creative genius behind Caesars Palace, and Jerry Zarowitz, who was a very colorful figure and unlicensable, was the gambling expert. Nate went all around the country trying to raise $5 million. There were 100 points available at $50,000 a point. Anybody could have invested. He didn't care. As long as you brought the money, he didn't care who you were. Well, he didn't get very far, because the history of Las Vegas was that every new casino that opened wound up going broke. The second owner bought it cheaply at the right price and was able to make it work. So why would anyone think that you could build this $25 million by the way, a huge number in those days, building and make it work. It was very, very difficult. He raised some money, but just like the Teamsters were the bank of last resort, there were a lot of people around with a lot of cash they didn't know what to do with. It was dark money. It was mob money. Think for a minute about, we've all seen the pictures of the cartels with their rooms full of money, $100 bills wrapped in plastic, and the biggest problem they have is the rats are eating the money. They weren't smart enough to figure out how to put that into businesses. But these guys figured out, these guys in Kansas City and New York and Chicago and St. Louis and Miami and LA and so forth, they could parcel out this money in $50,000 pieces and make an investment, usually in someone else's name, and get a return on that money. Right now it's just sitting in a lockbox somewhere, getting no return. And that's how a lot of the money was raised, the equity money was raised for Caesars Palace. Now, that being said, these guys, and they were not, well, they were mobsters. They would give you $50,000 or $100,000, but they wanted something in return, obviously, and they're used to getting cash out, cash back. So, and they wanted it on a monthly basis. So if they're going to give you their cash, they want it back. And by the way, I've got my no-good brother-in-law that I want to get out of town. You give him a job at the hotel so he can watch my investment. And that's how a lot of these characters wound up in Las Vegas. Yeah. So Caesars Palace, I'm not naive. There were a lot of people in Caesars Palace who had invested money that way. That way they put together the $5 million in cash that they needed, got the $20 million loan from the Teamsters that they needed, and the place was rife with mobsters. Were they really mobsters? I don't know. But anyway, now you go down the road and a couple of years go by, Caesars Palace is a huge success, monster success. And the problem with the monster success is it draws a lot of attention to the people who own it. And the owners decided they better sell it, because if all of a sudden a lot of disclosure was made about who owns this place and who they said owned this place, there would be some big problems. So they put the place up for sale. A company called Lums came along. Cliff Perlman was the chairman of Lums. And they made a deal to buy Caesars World by that time, or Caesars Palace, excuse me, from the owners. And that was a $60 million deal. So for $5 million, 3 years later, they got net of their mortgage, or net of the money that they invested. They made, what, $35 million in 3 years on a $5 million investment. That's 7 times your money in 3 years. That's a pretty good deal. And so everybody was real happy with it, except Lums stock, which was Cliff Perlman's company, Lums, which was hot dogs steamed in beer, went from about $60 a share to about $5 a share while the deal was being negotiated, because the company that Clifford had built was not a good company. Cliff was basically a lousy businessman. And I'll get into that in a minute. But anyway, the stock went down. The deal couldn't go through. It was supposed to be an all-cash deal, $60 million. They were going to sell 1 million shares of stock, give the proceeds to the owners of Caesars Palace. Thank you very much, goodbye and good luck. All the bad guys would leave, and Lums could come in and run it. Well, the deal went bad because the stock went south. So they had the right, the owners had the right to take the hotel back, but they didn't. Why didn't they? Because they would have had to disclose who owned it. So they took a big haircut on the deal over a period of time, and ultimately the deal closed, and Lums, which became Caesars World, with Clifford Perlman as the chairman, was the owner of the hotel. At the same time, all the brothers-in-law and cousins and so forth exited the premises, especially those that were of no value. Some were kept on because they were good employees, but most of those guys left. And that's how Caesars Palace was formed. It's
Bill, I wanted to make one note, and then I'll ask you another question about it. As I understand it, so 1969, Nevada passes the Corporate Gaming Act. And the Corporate Gaming Act was very important because what it did was it allowed publicly traded companies to invest in Las Vegas. And before that, if you had any ownership in a casino in Nevada, you had to have a background check, and you had to make sure you could be licensed. That might work when you've got 5 or 6 or 7 investors, but what if you have 20,000 shareholders all over the world? There's no way you can license everybody, right? So in 1969, Governor Paul Laxalt, with help from Perry Thomas, the banker, and others, came up with this Corporate Gaming Act, which said that you only had to license key employees at the casino operations. So it was a fraction of the actual ownership. And as I understand it, Lum's was the first company that took advantage of that law.
probably, I don't know that.
Hilton followed right on the heels of Lum's, and then others. But Hilton,
Howard Hughes.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Howard Hughes.
Well, and Hughes wasn't the difference with Hughes is he's not a publicly traded corporation. But yes, he kind of played a role in that whole thing as well. So Cliff Perlman, tell us about Cliff Perlman.
Well, Cliff is a good example of what happened with mob money coming into something. Cliff lived in Miami. After he bought Caesars Palace, he probably still spent 20 days a month in Miami, 5 days in LA at the corporate office, and 5 days at the hotel. And one of his good buddies was Al Melnick. They were about the same age. No, Al was younger, but Al had lots of money. Lots and lots of money. Nobody knew where it came from, but he had lots and lots of money. Cliff, as I mentioned, was a lousy businessman. The only good deal he ever made in his whole life was buying Caesars Palace. He had been a lawyer, he couldn't make a living. He went in the kitchen remodeling business, he couldn't make a living. He used to go to lunch at a little hot dog stand in Miami, and that was Lum's. And he turned that from a hot dog stand on the corner in Miami to roughly 300 and some fast food restaurants all over the country. Sounds like a great thing, except he did it all wrong and the house of cards came down. Right about the time he was buying Caesars Palace. He also bought a meat company, he also bought an Army-Navy store chain. All these things went bad. We were in the land development business, that went south. Everything he did went bad, except Caesars Palace. The result was that Caesars Palace was supporting all of these failing businesses while this was going on. Now, Cliff, if you said to me, is Cliff a mobster? No. Cliff is a serial entrepreneur who desperately needed money. He always needed money. Nobody would give him money, as I said, in the normal course of business. No banks, no insurance companies, no pension funds, nobody. They didn't want anything to do with him. Why? He's in the casino business. It's real simple. Now, so that's, I can talk for a minute about the deal in the Poconos, which I think is a good example, too, of exactly what Cliff's thinking was.
Why don't you do that, and then after that, I want you to talk about getting hired by Caesars, by Cliff Perlman.
Okay. Well, actually, I got hired before that because I was working.
Okay.
So I'll say how the story got hired. I flew from Cleveland. I was in the investment business in Cleveland. And I flew to Los Angeles to try to close a personal business deal, which fell through at the 11th hour. And so I came back through Las Vegas and stayed overnight and had breakfast the next morning with my dad, who was president of Caesars Palace, and Cliff. And the three of us are sitting at the table talking. And I was pouring out my tale of woe to my father and to Cliff. And Cliff is sitting in the middle. I'm sitting on his right, and my father is on his left. And Cliff is one of these guys, when he talked to you, he looked you right in the eye. And so he's talking to me, and he's looking me right in the eye, and he said, I just hired a search firm to find you. I want you. I said, what do you want me for? He said, I need a guy to work at our parent company in Los Angeles to be the go-between between our company and the New York Stock Exchange and the investment community in New York, and you have experience doing that, and you've got the background, blah, 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 blah. And while he's looking me straight in the eye, my father's going, and so I said, well, Cliff, it sounds really interesting to me. I think I'd like to do it. But he said, good. He said, next time you're out west, you talk to Bill McElnay, who was the president of Caesars World. He wants this person to be assistant to the president and liaison with Wall Street. I'm thinking to myself, that's a pretty interesting job. So anyway, the bottom line is I went to see Bill McElnay, and took the job at 50% of what I was making in Cleveland, when my expenses doubled living in LA, and my income went down by 50%. But I thought it was probably a pretty good opportunity. As Cliff said to me, if you want to live on the West Coast, get in the arena. You can always figure out what you're going to do after that. And I like that idea. So that's how I got hired. By the way,
and you moved from Caesars World to Caesars Palace.
well, before that, I want to say one thing before that. While I was at Caesars World in LA, first of all, the first thing that Bill McElnay said to me, he said, our number one priority, you and me, is to get us out of that Teamsters loan. We've got to replace the Teamsters loan because we have no credibility if we cannot do that. So that was our primary focus. I was at Caesars World for 3 years, and in that 3 years, we did ultimately get out from under that Teamsters pension fund loan and replace it with a different line of credit.
So you moved to Caesars Palace.
When my father took a job in Atlantic City as president of Bally's, which was under construction in Atlantic City, I should say that one of my deals with Cliff Perlin was I never wanted to work directly for my father. He and I had a great relationship, but I knew in a business relationship, it would be just like this. He was old school, I was new school. I'm real old school now, but he was...
There was the naming confusion, too.
Yes. Having the two of us with the same name in the hotel would have been a problem. Just confusing. So anyway, I moved up. When he moved to Atlantic City, I got a call from Cliff, and he said, you know, your dad's going to Atlantic City. I said, really? Of course I knew. And he said, yeah. He said, are you going to go with him? I said, heck no. I don't want to go to Atlantic City. It's a hellhole. So he said, good. You come to Las Vegas. And so I went home that night, and I said to my beautiful wife, we're moving to Las Vegas. She said, no, we're not. I don't want to move to Las Vegas. I love Los Angeles. Well, she lost.
So this kind of brings us to the story of the Caesars Palace Grand Prix, which was ultimately your baby. I mean, this was your thing at Caesars. And so how did that get, it took you a while to get it on though.
I walked into the office, I was still working in Los Angeles. I walked into the office one Monday morning, and Bill McElnay came in 2 minutes behind me, and he said, did you see the race from Monte Carlo on TV yesterday? I said, no. He said, do you know anything about racing? I said, no. He said, well, I think it'd be a great idea if we had a race like that in Las Vegas. I said, probably. He said, yeah, my wife thinks so too. Well, that was the clincher. So he said, and I talked to Cliff, and Cliff thinks it'd be a terrific idea. I said, that's nice. He said, you're on it. Do it. So I said, well, okay. It took 5 years. Now, why did it take 5 years? I had no idea, and Randy can back me up, I had no idea of the maze of problems that exists in the world of auto racing, political problems, ego problems, people grabbing power here and grabbing power there, jealousies here and jealousies there. It was a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. And all these people had a reason, at least they thought they had a reason for being an impediment to our putting on the race. And so I had to, as I mentioned to the board of directors at one day, it was like running a race where you're running over a hurdle, constantly have to run a hurdle. Every time you jump a hurdle, they put another hurdle in front of you. And literally this went on for 5 years. Things like, well, you can't run a race on the track unless, it can't be an F1 race unless you've already run an auto race on that track and proved that it's a good track. And I said, we're not doing that. We're not building a racetrack in our parking lot and in the land next door to it that we lease for 1 week a year, and put some third-rate race on that nobody cares about. That's too big an investment to do that. Well, that was a huge hurdle to overcome. And then I had problems with NASCAR. I had problems with Chris Pook in Long Beach at the Formula One race in Long Beach. I had problems with the Europeans who were afraid that the Americans were going to take over the sport. It went on and on and on and on. And I had big problems with the local people. It was unanimous. The city, the county, the state, and the United States government all told me absolutely no.
I recall your initial proposal for the 81 event was you were going to run it down about a quarter mile of the strip.
Right.
And that's where the federal government came in. That was still...
Well, that wasn't where that's where the state came in and the county came in. The federal government, if you can think about Caesars Palace, the race was going to start actually where it did start, come down, run into the strip, make a right-hand turn, make another right-hand turn and go up the driveway of Caesars Palace where the fountains are, go underneath the porte cochere, back onto the strip, right turn onto what was then Dunes Road, up Dunes Road to the freeway entrance. And we were going to build a ramp down from the freeway entrance onto our property, do the course on the rest of the property, and come back to the start-finish line. It would have been spectacular. Well, the city said no, and the county said no, because we can't encircle Caesars Palace with a racetrack because we won't be able to get emergency equipment in case there's an emergency. The state said no because the Las Vegas Boulevard is a state highway, and they said, you're going to have to tear up that road, and we aren't going to let you tear up that road and mess up the traffic on Las Vegas Boulevard. So that's the end of that story. The federal government said the freeway system is part of our national defense system, and it would take an act of Congress to allow you to do that, and I know you don't have that time for that. I said, you're right, I don't. So we wound up doing it all on our own land.
In the end, I mean, you were successful in bringing Grand Prix to Las Vegas. It unfortunately didn't go as well as you'd hoped. What were some of the problems with the success of it?
Okay, from Caesars Palace point of view, the idea was we thought there was an untapped market in Europe and in Asia and in the Middle East who were Formula One fans, because we looked what's going on in Monaco, and all these fancy people are walking up and down the street in Monaco, spending money like it's water, and we figured, well, they'd probably like to come gamble at Caesars Palace. Well, they didn't. all we needed really was maybe a dozen of the kind of people that we thought ought to be there. It cost us, the first year, we made a $7 million investment to put the race on. Now think about that for a minute. That's 1981. Caesars Palace opened in 1966. That's 15 years later. This place opened for $25 million, and we spent $7 million on a promotion 15 years later. So that's a big chunk of money relative to what we had. But we thought it'd be worthwhile. And as I said, if a dozen great gamblers had showed up, it would have been a huge success. I always used to tell people who came into me to talk to me about business they could bring to the hotel, and I can bring 20,000 people a year here, so on and so forth. I said, just bring me 5 good ones. That's all I want. But so that was the problem with the race from our point of view. The good news was the city and Caesars Palace got the most wonderful publicity worldwide on this thing that, well, certainly Caesars Palace had ever gotten. And I can't speak for Las Vegas, but I suspect for Las Vegas as well. We were at every television set in the world with this, either the news about the race itself, something all the time, Caesars Palace, Caesars Palace, Caesars Palace, which also is probably one of the reasons why we got very little help from the other casinos in town, because we insisted, that was another thing we insisted upon, that it be called the Caesars Palace Grand Prix for all the obvious reasons.
Randy, from your standpoint as a historian, I mean, what's your analysis of why it didn't work? Some of the same things, I assume, but what do you see looking back?
Certainly, Las Vegas didn't really know what to do with it. the attendance at the Grand Prix for its 2 Formula One years and its 2 IndyCar years was never more than about 35,000. It dwindled from 81 to 82. Like Bill said, the resort corridor did not embrace the concept. As I recall, the access to the track was through the Caesars Palace Casino. And it is called the Caesars Palace Grand Prix. It was tough for the resort corridor to get on board. And certainly the attendance itself was not going to move the meter. And it just did not bring in the gamblers. I asked Bill at one point about, there was such then and now there's this huge following in Saudi Arabia. And there's these legends of Saudi Arabian gamblers who spirit into Las Vegas and gamble millions and then head back. And Bill said they just didn't show up, and we never knew why.
Yeah. So now we're looking to do it again. It's a very different place, Las Vegas, than it was then. It's much bigger. Technology makes the races interesting in new ways. You have cameras in the cars, so you can see everything that's happening on TV anyway. And there are some advantages that Las Vegas has this time around. But what will be different this time? Maybe I'll ask each of you. Maybe we can start with Randy.
Well, for anyone who pays any attention to what's going on in Vegas, the scale of the event is so different. Bill wanted to run down a 1/4 mile of strip and couldn't do it. This one's going to run down 1.5 miles of strip, right down the primary resort corridor, down Harmon, Koval, up Sands, and back down the strip. Formula One itself has grown so much in the last 40 years. It has grown so much since the American company Liberty Media acquired it 6 years ago. I think that Formula One paid $240 million for that 39 acres where the old Ice nightclub stood, and they've developed it as this. It's going to be an event, year-round event center of some type. I've heard rumblings that there may be resort development in Formula One's future, but I think that really speaks to their commitment to this. Bill and I lunched with Steve Hill of the LV Convention and Visitors Authority last year, and one of our topics of conversation was how different it is that Formula One, Liberty Media, is the promoter of this event. Not Caesars Palace, not the local sporting entity in the 20-some countries that Formula One competes in. Liberty Media and Formula One owns and is promoting this event. They've got a 10-year tail on it. They're supposed to be here for 10 years. Formula One lasted 2 years at Caesars Palace. It was just such a difficult sell. As long as Las Vegas can get comfortable with shutting down the strip for 3 days, woo.
We'll get to that, but I want to just kind of emphasize, because I didn't really fully recognize this until we started preparing this program, just how big Formula One racing is largely outside the United States. It's sort of a parallel with soccer, right? It's massive sport around the world, but not so much in the U.S.
It has a bigger fan base than any other sport in the world.
I'd agree with that.
That's fact.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with your fact. Even here, the viewership of IndyCar about 21 million a year, NASCAR 24 million a year, Formula One even here in America 27 million TV viewers a year. The global audience for Formula One is 1 billion viewers a year.
Wow. It makes sense for Las Vegas to want to get in on that.
Yes, it does. It's a hugely successful company. Their stock returned 23% this year. Did you invest? Yeah, nor I.
There's a couple little interesting factoids about this that I thought we could explore just briefly. Even though it's, as you noted, your numbers, that there's a lot of viewers even in the U.S., there will be no American drivers in this race.
No American drivers. There's an American-owned team, Haas Formula One. Their industrial company is from Southern California. Might move to Henderson someday. Their Formula One factory is in England, like most of them are. There's no American driver in Formula One. Hasn't been for a number of years. To this day, there's only been one American winner of a Formula One event and a championship. That's Mario Andretti. His son, Michael Andretti, who's now about 60 years old, very famous in American motorsport. He's already testing a car to the 2023 spec, hoping that he will be able to, Andretti Autosport or Andretti Global, I think they're called, will enter Formula One in 2025. Whether there'll be an American driver, who knows?
Yeah. What is it? Why aren't American young men or women looking to do this?
I think every American who races IndyCar wishes they could get a shot at Formula One.
Okay.
It's a global sport. The technology of IndyCar is probably 10 to 15 years behind Formula One, relatively speaking. And so IndyCar is not a particularly useful feeder sport to international Formula One.
Yeah.
Like Bill had any number of obstacles to overcome for his race. There's so many obstacles for anyone to, there's only 20 drivers in Formula One. That's it. There are feeder series that hope to get people there, but it's largely, did Red Bull notice this go-kart driver when he was 11 years old? And they put him into the Red Bull feeder system so that he could land in Formula One in 10 years, something like that.
One of the other problems is that most of the American racing is oval racing. Formula One is road racing.
Yeah.
And so we don't train our drivers to road race.
Yeah, yeah. Bill, what is your, sort of in a way of wrapping up, like what is your, how do you think it's going to go next month when we have...
Well, I was wrong once. I'm 1 for 1.
Yeah.
I don't think the motives of Liberty Media are anywhere, I mean, not nearly what Caesars Palace were at the time. I think it's going to be a huge spectacle. I think the television audience is going to be very large, and the television show that gets put on is going to be fantastic with the entertainment that they're planning, with the nighttime lights and cars going down the strip at 200 miles an hour and all the screaming, yelling, and noise and things going on. It's going to be a great TV show. And that's what Liberty Media is interested in because that's what they sell.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't worry about anyone going to the crap tables. They could care less. So it's a good marriage between Liberty Media and Las Vegas. It's not necessarily good, but Las Vegas in the macro sense, but not in the micro sense in that the casinos necessarily are going to do really well. I don't know that they will. They may have the same problem this time that we had, is that gamblers really aren't interested. And we get a race starting at 10 o'clock at night. They'd rather be at the crap table. So they can come be at the crap table anytime they want. They don't have to fight the crowd at the Formula One. It's, who knows?
Yeah.
Formula One has grown so dramatically in the 40 years since we did the race that it's a great unknown at the moment.
What's your thoughts, Randy, on that same question?
I'm hoping there's no labor unrest that weekend on the Strip. I agree with everything Bill said. It is going to be a media spectacle. It'll be the most viewed Formula One event of this season. Another contrast, it's going to be the most viewed, but it's not going to determine the champion. The champion's already been determined.
Oh.
Max Verstappen, he's so far ahead that 5 events to go, and he was already the points champion. Bill's event determined the global Formula One world champion in the 2 Formula One years. So Bill's got those bragging rights. Liberty Media and Las Vegas Grand Prix will not have that this year, but it'll be a TV spectacle. It'll probably have a global viewing audience in the hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
It'll dwarf anything this town's seen before. Rossi Rallencotter estimated that your event pumped $125 million through the Las Vegas economy. Formula One anticipates $1.3 billion pumped through the Las Vegas economy. That's almost 4 times the rate of inflation over 40 years. So it should be successful on every measure as long as we can get comfortable with it.
Right. I mean, there's that macro level, $1 billion coming in the door, the media exposure, which you can't count the value of that. I do worry about the micro level where people have to walk a mile to get to work, stuff like that. That's not great. But that's the thing. We're in Las Vegas, right? And that's we make sacrifices, I guess, for that kind of thing.
And we make spectacles.
Yeah. So, Randy, to wrap it up before we take some questions, we've had a couple mentions of Bernie Ecclestone. He was the face of this type of racing for decades. He was no longer involved as of 2017. What's the latest on Bernie?
The latest on Bernie, he just got an $800 million tax judgment against him that he's got to pay. He's 92 years old. He's still going strong. His claim to fame right now are his two daughters who have bought the most expensive homes subsequently sold most expensive homes in Beverly Hills.
Wow.
So Bernie is one of the great characters I ever met. He's stands all of 5'3", always impeccably dressed, speaks beautifully. He's British. Why wouldn't? Has no major educational background whatsoever. Figured out how to put Formula One together. It was a group of independent teams who showed up at a race if they felt like it. And he convinced them that you guys have to all work together and show up at the designated time, at the place, at the designated time, and run a race, and we'll all be better off. And he was 100% right. And what he took in return for that was ownership of the media rights, and he was as I said, the czar of Formula One. His word was law. And he did that for 35 years and wound up selling his interest for about $3 billion. So he had a nice return, made a lot of money. And I got along great with the guy. He was a man of his word. If he shook your hand and said, "I'll do it," he did it.
Very good. Well, why don't we open it up to some questions from you. We'll bring around a microphone for those who have a question. And first question over on the left here.
What is the thought process behind the decision to run the race at nighttime?
Generally, the global audience. There will be more viewers in Europe and Asia than there will be in the United States, and so they're trying to kind of split the difference there. But they will serve more of their audience if they start the race at 10.
Another question? Oh, here's some up here.
When it's televised, will it be pay-per-view or just regular channels?
I don't know. And I believe NBC broadcasts Formula One. I don't know if
I
we've
thought
got.
ESPN did.
Oh, I'm sorry, ESPN?
Yeah,
I apologize, ESPN.
I think it's just going to be, you can turn it on at night, at 10 o'clock at night. Actually, they'll probably go on earlier because I wouldn't be surprised if they show the pre-race entertainment part on television as well. But I don't know. They didn't call me.
Well, and part of the success of Formula One more recently is its TV coverage, right? ESPN picked it up. There's
Huge.
these TV shows like Drive to Survive and things like that have really
Very much so. Yeah.
built the audience in America.
There's a very striking difference between the automobile of NASCAR and IndyCar versus Formula One. Although the difference between IndyCar and Formula One is less obvious, could you explain the difference between the two vehicles? And what makes them different?
Yeah, you're right. IndyCar and Formula One are somewhat visually similar, as in 1981, they were much more visually similar. In fact, there was a time when they were proposed to race at the same event on the same track, but it obviously didn't happen.
Another great idea I had that didn't work.
Yeah, would have been awesome. Formula One, they have a lot more digital control, a lot more aerodynamic control, a lot more power plant development. The IndyCar series is pretty much a spec series. They're all going to race one of two power plants. They're all going to race basically the same chassis. And in Formula One, each one of the 10 constructors develop their own chassis at a cost we cannot contemplate. And there are probably 4 or 5 different power plant manufacturers, again, at a cost we cannot contemplate. but just a quantum leap ahead from IndyCar, which again is pretty much a specification series. Everybody's pretty much running the same thing.
Yeah, just to add to that, when I was involved, which of course is ancient history, but I think it's probably still pretty much true today, it cost 10 times more to field an F1 team than an IndyCar team.
Wow.
That's the level of sophistication difference between the two.
Okay.
Yes. Has there been any hint of organized crime going on with our racetrack that we have out here north of town?
No.
I've heard nothing.
The question, is there any organized crime links to our NASCAR
No, and
track?
that's why I haven't written a book about that place. No, but it was there was a Formula One venture that involved Las Vegas Motor Speedway. They do have an infield road course there, and at one time, Bruton Smith, the owner, and Bernie Ecclestone, who controlled Formula One, they were talking about having a race there. Obviously, it never happened.
One up here. Shayla.
Can the Formula One racetrack be used for something other than Formula One?
I can't picture that happening.
I can't either. It would
It can't be used for.
Bicycle
it could be. Let's put it this way. Yes, it could be if
and
the
Indy-
city was willing to shut down the streets and go through all this rigmarole again for a secondary race, but I don't think that's going to happen.
There's a little bit of talk about the portion of the track that is at the corner of Harmon and Koval on what's now Formula One's property. There's talk of maybe having a driving school there, something like that. Again, those 3 or 4 corners are on private property, and I'm sure they'll use them if they can.
Is it basically based upon ad revenues from Liberty Mutual? They can make this work on a global basis. It doesn't matter what the local revenues are.
The ad revenues kind of reside with ESPN. That's how they pay the fees that they pay to Formula One and Liberty Media. The sponsorships, there's sponsorships at all of those levels. Formula One has its sponsors. The Saudi oil company, Aramco, they're one of the huge Formula One sponsors. But then every team's got its own group of sponsorships that run in the hundreds of millions of dollars in the aggregate, maybe the billions in the aggregate. But ad revenue, probably going to belong to ESPN.
All right, we got time for 1 or 2 more. I think up here we had. He's going to bring a microphone too.
I just wanted to know what's going to happen on the strip after the race is over. Are all those grandstands coming out and going back in next year for next year's race, or are they staying there? What's going to happen there?
My guess is they're leaving. They'll be gone within 3 days.
Really?
That's my guess. As I said, they didn't call me.
Yours were gone within 1 day, weren't they?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Then they'll bring them back in October of 2024 or so. We have one more back here.
Caesars Palace used to be very big in the sports business, not just with Formula One, but with boxing, tennis, that kind of stuff. And then they seem to have gotten out of it. Why was that?
I left. No, that's not exactly true, but the management group that came in over the years, my leaving and other people leaving, had other priorities.
It is an interesting thing, though, because now within the last 10 years, you've heard a lot of discussion in Las Vegas about spectacles, right? About this is a place where people come for a 1 or 2 day thing, like a music festival or what have you, and that's like our new thing, right? But that's what Caesars Palace was doing from 1966 to 1985 or so, and then we got away from it for some reason. So, all right. Well, if that's all the questions, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Randy's book on the Caesars Palace Grand Prix is available for in the waiting room outside the courtroom. I encourage you to get the book. It's really interesting, and Randy will sign a copy for you if you like.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.